introduce yourself.
My name is Matt Smith. But
So you grew up in Poughkeepsie?
yes,
Where did you go to school?
I went to Arlington primarily.
And what did your parents do for a living?
My father had an oil business. He was a chemical engineer for Shell Oil for years, then started his own business in 1960. And my mother worked with him at the business. And I would always help when I was a little kid. I'd ride around the oil truck or go with a serviceman to do oil burner work.
And how did you get involved in this project?
In this project, I started helping Bill Seppi years ago with the bridge when it was his dream to make it a walkway. And it was back in the stage when most people, I think, thought it was a harebrained idea. I still remember when he came to a Highland Town Board meeting and he told people what his idea was during the public comment period. And several members of the board even said, "That's the craziest idea I ever heard of." Well, I kind of liked it, so afterwards I went up and I said, "Bill, I'd like to do whatever I could to help." So we had the company at the time, we had a loader that we used to load coal, and I brought that big loader over, and we removed a lot of the big stones that had been placed by the railroad at the west end of the bridge, and we dragged some of the rails off of the loader, and I did some work that way for some time.
And you have some diving experience. What was that like?
Well, Bill Seppi was told a number of things by all these different naysayers. And one of the things was that the bridge was probably in danger of collapsing because it was so old and, who knew what the structure supporting it was like. So he knew I was a diver. We have a marine services company, and he asked me to take a look at the piers. Now, that would normally be quite an expensive project, but like I say, I was sort of sold on the idea, so I went out there with my crew, and we had a remote operated vehicle that we used, and also actually divers that went down and felt the structure over basically. And we did, I think 3 of the piers, didn't do all of them, but what we found was great. The thing was in perfect condition. There was no erosion around the bases of them from the current. The wooden structures were fine. So that really allayed a lot of fears in people's minds that the thing was worthless and was going to collapse.
What do you feel is most interesting about the bridge, a person or event or anything?
The most interesting thing to me is the underwater construction, really, of the bridge. Most people probably looked at it and goes, why is that even at all interesting? Well, I think it is because the bridge, when you look out at the bridge, you see big stone piers that it's built on, and it looks very strong. But that's really not, that only goes 15 feet below the surface, and it's built on a wooden cribbing structure that's filled with crushed stone and rocks and so on. And to have that structure be there that length of time, and the engineering that went into it way back in the 1860s, really, when they figured out how they were going to build this thing, that to me is the most interesting part of the bridge.
Are you concerned about the direction that the bridge is going, or are there any concerns?
I'm happily concerned right now. I think it's going in a great direction. Bill Seppi had a magnificent idea. I know there was a lot of people that said it was harebrained, and he didn't care. He just kept right on plugging along. And it's really morphed into what it is now. There's many more people involved. I know they've gotten grants from a number of different people, and now with Governor Spitzer's announcement that this is going to be a state park when it's finished, it's a fantastic opportunity for the central Mid-Hudson area. I think the bridge is going to serve a greater function now than it did actually when it was running as a railroad bridge. I think it's going to bring more people to the area. There'll be more money spent in the area. The trains were going through before, just leaving the pollution, and they delivered freight to both sides, including my own company, the coal company in Highland. But I think that what it's going to be now is actually better than what it was.
As the project manager for the Highland Landing Park, how do you feel that this bridge will affect?
Well, the Highland Landing Park is, I'll give you a little background on that. There's 280 miles approximately of riverfront on both sides of the river. And Highland, we believe, is the only community that does not have public access to the river. And of course, we're in the shadow of the railroad bridge. And the railroad bridge is a beautiful structure, as is the Mid-Hudson Bridge, just a little bit further to the south from our park location there. So since 1993 or 1994, I've been working on getting this piece of property down by the river for a public park. And our closing is April 11th, 2008, coming up here. So it's been a long struggle for that. And all these other things all tie into it. The Hudson Valley Rail Trail, which is going to go to the end of the bridge, the walkway. The walkway itself, Dutchess County's development of their rail trails, parks and open space have become much more important. The river has really regained its importance. The river in the 60s, I spent a lot of time on the river, and it was an industrial sewer. Excuse me. You could actually at times see raw sewage floating in the river. When the waves would break on the shore, there'd be big balls of foam, and it was soap from people's washing machines was just flushed directly into the river. And it was awful. I mean, you caught fish that had, gross deformities, and it's just come a long ways. The people that didn't have as much money were pushed down to the riverbanks, really. That was where the old industrial factories were at one time. And as the industry sort of dried up, the people that didn't have as much money got pushed down to live in the poor section of town, they called it. And now, you better have a lot of money if you want to buy a river lot now. So it's just, that just delights me that the river has come back and it's clean. When you look in the river, it looks brown, but that's not that it's dirty. That's sediment that comes, and after every rainstorm, all the streams wash into the river and they carry more really mud, dirt into the river. When Henry Hudson sailed up the river, it looked like it does now. It wasn't blue. So the fact that it's clean has nothing to do with the brown color of it. It's clean. There's no chemicals being flushed into it, or very few now. Sewage is not being flushed into it. It's really come around, and everybody recognizes the importance of the river now to the community. So our park, the walkway over the Hudson. In the 1960s, if somebody said you wanted to walk down to the river, kind of look at you funny. It smelled bad. It was just not a good place. There was so many dead fish along the sides that it literally smelled like, rotting flesh. Nothing could really live in the river very long. And it's hard to believe nowadays that anyone could ever have been that short-sighted, but that's the way it was.
So you think that this bridge is just another improvement to the...
Absolutely, yeah. It's another recognition by people at the river, and the Hudson River Valley is very important. We all think it is because we live here, but it's nice to have other people recognize the importance of the river and the walkway over the Hudson and the parks. Yeah, that's a great thing.
Okay, so how did your coal company affect your involvement in the bridge?
We were directly affected by the bridge fire and closing. The bridge burned in the mid-70s, I believe, 74, 75. And they still ran, they shut the bridge off itself right at each bank, but they still ran freight deliveries on the railroad tracks up to our coal yard. I believe was the last siding before the railroad bridge. We were only less than a mile from the bridge. And we continued to get coal until Valentine's Day of 1983. And that's when they decided to close that line from Maybrook all the way to the bridge. So too bad, you couldn't get any more coal. So we had to start trucking coal in then. So that really had an effect on us. It was very difficult even to schedule shipments from when the bridge built until when they closed that last spur also, because they just weren't running that way very often. They had to wait till they got 2 or 3 cars. You might have to wait a month to get your coal. And people burn coal in the winter, so when the car that you ordered back in December got there in February or March, it wasn't that great. So
you've been on the bridge many times then?
yes.
And what was that like?
Well, we actually delivered coal to the little watchman's shanties on each end of the bridge, and they all had coal stoves. For some reason, the railroad stuck with coal stoves right on through. Maybe they still do, I don't know. But when we deliver coal there, you talk to the watchman and after the delivery, and if they were heading across the bridge, apparently they walked the bridge many times a day to check for fires and so on. And I would walk with them across, and I walked on it when it still had the wooden deck. It was a little scary. It was so high, and the wooden deck didn't look to be all that, new. It's kind of weathered and old looking, but they walked it all the time, and they seem to be happy. So it's like the lemmings, maybe, I don't know.
And so, like, when the transition happened from Bill Seppi as like the leader of the organization to the new like leadership, how do you think that affected the project?
Well, Bill Seppi had the grand idea and the vision to push this thing to where other people took over and really developed the idea. Bill did a lot of work, and without Bill, I don't believe we'd be talking about this thing as a park or a bridge or anything at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill's dream was to build that bridge himself with volunteers from one side to the other. And it was taking too long, and there was too many impediments put in the way by different other safety organizations, the Coast Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers,
Mm-hmm.
the building departments on both sides of the river. There's many safety concerns. So that this new generation of bridge people have overcome all of these things. They've addressed the safety concerns. They're applying for grants. They've gotten money from a number of different places, and the bridge project is basically, I think, like a ball rolling downhill now. It's unstoppable. There's so much momentum that it would be very difficult to stop it, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. And what are you most excited about for the bridge, like when it's completed?
I'm excited about the opportunities it's going to bring for the Mid-Hudson Valley region, the central Mid-Hudson Valley region here, going on out into Dutchess County and on into Ulster County. There's going to be so many people that come up to enjoy this wonderful thing that we have, this walkway. The glass elevator on the Poughkeepsie side, there's going to be people that come just to ride up and down the elevator. They're going to be scared to walk out on the bridge. Some people don't like heights, and they're not going to go out there, but just the whole project is going to be wonderful. And it's going to have many offshoots. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Hudson Valley Rail Trail on the West Shore in the town of Lloyd. And right now, the rail trail has become the most used recreational facility in the town of Lloyd. When that bridge opens, it's going to be even better. I mean, anything that borders on the rail trail now, you're going to have so much traffic pass there. It has to spur economic development on not only our side of the river, but everywhere. But I know it's going to happen. And I think our side, we have access right now. It's probably going to start from our side. So we're sort of looking forward to this whole project.
And did you ever hear of any other ideas to like recycle or redo the bridge that you thought were better, or do you think that
this one is the best idea? It's funny you mention that, because right after the bridge burned, I had talked to a number of friends of mine, some lawyers and doctors and so on, and we decided that people with money, this would be a great thing to buy because of the congestion on the Mid-Hudson Highway Bridge. They didn't have the 3 lanes at peak time then. They just had 2 lanes, and the traffic backed up for miles and miles every day. And the people in Ulster County worked at IBM mostly in Poughkeepsie, and the line on our side of the river went all the way up 9W, right up to 299 and further sometimes, and south to, close to Milton. So to build another crossing, and the Mid-Hudson Bridge Authority talked about building another crossing at the time, and then they decided to modify the Mid-Hudson Bridge and make the 3rd lane. But they said any planning for a bridge like that, we wouldn't have a bridge for 10 to 15 years. So we're looking at this traffic, it's just steadily going to grow and grow and grow. So we thought that'd be a great idea to buy this bridge, put a deck on it. If it held 2 trains, it can certainly hold cars. And we actually had an engineer that went out and looked at it, and then one of the lawyers that was involved talked to some of the people from the state, and he said they're going to throw every roadblock that you can think in your way. They don't want that to happen, so we just kind of gave up on it. But I know there were several other people who had the same idea, but we might have been the first ones to have that idea. But this is so much better, this project, than a highway crossing.
So you think it'll be useful as a state park as opposed to like having like traffic over it?
Oh,
Or, like, cars and
absolutely,
trains?
yeah. Traffic, well, the jury's still out on exactly what they're going to have up there. There's still some talk of a little trolley car or train up on top, just for commuter use. And that'd be a nice thing, too. I guess nothing is really completely firmed up yet. They're going to put the deck on, and the design is still on. But yeah, this is going to be much better for the region than just a bridge that people could drive across.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other stories you have, like about the bell or anything that you want to tell?
Yeah, the bell. Bill Sepe asked me to do the diving around the piers to check them out. And we were actually getting ready. I think we had launched at Warriors Park. We launched our dive boat, and there was some guy there telling us a story about this bell that was on the bridge. And we thought, yeah. Well, then one of my divers showed up, and he knew the guy, and he said, yeah, I've heard this story before. There was 3 guys that went out to take this bell. They were going to sell it for scrap, I guess. So they climbed up. There was ladders that came down each of the piers almost to the water, which they've since cut off. But these guys took this little boat out there, and they went up and they got the bell, and they lowered it down with ropes, and it was very heavy, and they lowered it onto the bow of their little boat, and supposedly, the story goes, the boat leaned because of the weight, and the bell went in the water and sank. And it's about 70 feet deep there, so that was that. So I told Bill this story, and he said, boy, if you could find that bell, that'd be great. So we didn't spend a lot of time looking for it, and it's supposed to be down on the bottom there, underneath where the little tripod is, which is still in place where the bell used to mount. But the bell, I would imagine, has sunk into the bottom sediment, and there needs to be, you need to get down there with a metal detector or proton magnetometer and find it like that. But supposedly it's down there. That may be a legend, but that's the story.
Were you nervous, like scuba diving down there, with how, like you said, the river was used to be so polluted and everything?
Yeah, it's interesting that you said scuba dive, because we started out hard hat diving there. We have a super light 17 system, which has an umbilical that goes to the surface that supplies you with air from the surface, it's very comforting if you get stuck, because you've got air coming from a non-exhaustible source. But there's so much current out there. The current runs about 3 to 3.5 knots, and it splits at the piers and actually accelerates. So with this long hose, when you're down near the bottom, you got 70 feet of hose out, you had to wear over 100 pounds of lead to stay in one spot and hang on for dear life. So we went to scuba, and it was much easier. We still had we strung lines down there, but you didn't have all of that drag on this umbilical cord that was 2 inches or 2.5 inches in diameter going all the way to the surface. So the scuba allowed us to be much more maneuverable down there, and of course you didn't have an inexhaustible air supply, but you still have a tender on the surface, and there's wireless communications, so they're keeping track of your air and so on. But we pretty much felt over all of the 3 piers. We did find an area on the Poughkeepsie. I think the pier nearest Poughkeepsie had a void in it. There was a couple of the timbers that were moved out, and you could feel in there nothing. So I took an extendable boat hook pole, a telescoping boat hook pole, and I felt around there, and it didn't really, the cavity didn't seem to be too deep. So, but yeah, we told Bill that this was in good shape. There was no erosion at the bottom. It was a little scary sometimes. There's blue claw crabs in the river. I don't know if you knew that or not. They're generally thought to be a pretty much saltwater delicacy. People eat blue claw crabs, and Maryland crabs are blue claw crabs. But there's actually a lot of them in the river, and people catch them right over at Mariners Harbor at the dock there. They'll fill a whole 5-gallon pail with little blue claw crabs and take them home and eat them. The river is clean now, but they did that even back in the 60s, so I don't know. Explains a lot of things maybe. But at any rate, these little crabs love the timber structure and little fish. It's actually bottom habitat for raising little fish and little crabs. So you're feeling around there, and all of a sudden a little crab runs up your arm. It's just, we saw a sturgeon at one point. Actually, I'm not sure if that was on that project or it was on a water intake inspection for one of the communities, but the sturgeon was at least 6 feet long. So everything is so immediate down there. Your visibility is no more than a foot usually, even with a strong light. And when the silt is really bad, the light only makes it worse. It looks like a blizzard then. So, it's interesting diving in the river.
And then is the void repaired now, or?
No, it's. I think the divers looked at it again. That just did the reinspection, and they said it'll be repaired at some point, but it's not structural. It's not a big problem.
Okay. Is there any other stories that you wanted to tell that you didn't mention? about
One-
like your childhood or anything
Well,
like
we had, the Poughkeepsie Yacht Club used to be down just south of the Mid-Hudson Bridge
that?
on shore there. And the Pirate Canoe Club was right under the bridge, actually. Their parking lot was right underneath the road deck. And as a small child, my father used to take me down to the Poughkeepsie Yacht Club, where he was a member, actually was the Commodore for several years. And I would leave there with a little aluminum boat that I had bought myself, and I think I was 12. And I'd put my dog, I had a Labrador Retriever in the boat, and a little tent, and some little frying pan, and I would go all the way up to Esopus Island, or further north even, up by Norrie Point, with this boat, and go camping for the weekend. I guess you can't do that anymore with your kid, but, and I remember going all around the piers on both the bridges, the Mid-Hudson Bridge and what's the Walkway now, the railroad bridge, and they were still using the bridge, of course, at the time, so it was fascinating to be underneath there when the train went chugging across up above. It was great, and we had a sailing dinghy that I used to sail all around that whole area underneath the bridge, and it's always been a part of my life, really, the bridge. I'm just so happy to see that this is happening now. It's going to be used for something.
I think that's it.
Okay.